These Reddit stories aren't about cheating. They're about revenge, secrets, and betrayals so perfectly timed, they feel unreal. By the end of this video, you won't know who to feel sorry for. Story 1. My smart fridge exposed my husband's affair. I didn't check his phone. I didn't follow him. Our refrigerator told me everything, and his mistress just called to ask why I stopped buying her yogurt. I never wanted a smart fridge. I was perfectly happy living in blissful ignorance, opening a regular dumb fridge, staring inside for 5 minutes, and deciding there was nothing to eat despite it being objectively full. My husband, Mark, however, was obsessed with optimizing life. Smart lights, smart locks, smart thermostat, smart toothbrush. I'm not joking. It had Bluetooth and judged my brushing technique. The fridge was his crown jewel. It tracked groceries, synced with our phones, auto-ordered essentials, and sent helpful reminders. I ignored most notifications. Until one Tuesday afternoon, while I was in a work meeting, my phone buzzed with added to shared grocery list, vanilla Greek yogurt, honey granola clusters, fresh raspberries, oat milk, barista blend. I frowned. I'm lactose intolerant, hate raspberries, and think granola clusters taste like decorative gravel. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. Technology loves gaslighting women. But then another notification popped up. Reminder, don't forget almond butter cups. Sarah loves these. Sarah. I didn't know a Sarah. I scrolled back through the list history and my stomach dropped. Over the past 3 months, there were patterns. Same yogurt, same berries, same stupid barista oat milk. Purchased regularly, always weekday afternoons, always quantities meant for one person, not a family. The fridge wasn't just tracking food, it was documenting a second life. I sat there, camera off, while my coworker discussed quarterly projections and realized my marriage was being exposed by a Wi-Fi-enabled appliance that cost $3,000 and hated me personally. That night, I casually asked Mark if he'd been eating yogurt lately. He laughed too fast. Oh yeah, trying to be healthy. This man considers pizza a vegetable. I nodded and said nothing. Instead, I opened the fridge app and disabled auto purchase. Cold turkey, no yogurt, no raspberries, no oat milk. I wanted to see what would happen. 3 days later, while folding laundry, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, already annoyed. A woman's voice said, confused but oddly entitled, "Hi, is this Emily? I think there's been a mistake. I haven't had my yogurt in days." I sat down so hard I missed the chair. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "Who is this?" She hesitated. "This is Sarah, Mark's friend?" And just like that, my fridge stopped being the villain and became my favorite snitch. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I laughed. Full-on, unhinged laughter that made Sarah nervously clear her throat. I told her she must have the wrong number and hung up. Then I stared at the wall for a solid 10 minutes, replaying everything. The late work nights, the sudden obsession with oat milk, the way he once yelled at me for messing up the fridge settings. The audacity. I checked the app again. The fridge had logged missed consumption alerts. Apparently, Sarah was behind on her yogurt intake. Incredible. I decided, in that moment, that if my marriage was ending because of a refrigerator, I was going to enjoy the ride. I re-enabled auto purchase. But I edited the list. I replaced her vanilla yogurt with ultra-protein, unsweetened, zero-fat, chalk-texture sadness. Swapped raspberries for prunes, granola for bran flakes, oat milk for lactose-free skim milk. Then I waited. 2 days later, Sarah called again, this time furious. "Why did you change everything?" she demanded. I told her, calmly, that I was experimenting with gut health. She snapped, "Mark hates this stuff." I smiled so hard my face hurt. "Oh," I said, "that's funny. He told me he loved it." Silence. Then quietly, "He told you?" That was my opening. I told her everything. How long we'd been married, how the groceries were coming to my house, how the fridge sent receipts to my email, how I knew when she ate yogurt better than I knew my own mother's birthday. She started crying. Apparently, Mark had told her we were separated. Apparently, he basically lived alone. Apparently, she thought I was the side chick. We bonded over mutual betrayal and an intense shared hatred of smart appliances. By the end of the call, she apologized and said she'd confront him. I told her not to bother. I already had plans. That evening, I cooked dinner and waited. When Mark walked in, I casually asked him if Sarah preferred vanilla or honey yogurt. His face turned the color of printer paper. He stammered, denied, deflected, claimed it was just a coworker. I slid my phone across the table and opened the fridge app timeline. Time-stamped purchases, consumption logs, missed yogurt alert. He stared at it like it was evidence from a murder trial. Finally, he whispered, "You checked the fridge?" I laughed. "No, Mark, the fridge checked you." He moved out that night, took his toothbrush, forgot his dignity. The fridge sent me a notification at 2 a.m. Household size updated, 1. I slept like a baby. The next morning, Sarah showed up at my door. She brought flowers, an apology, and, I swear this is true, a container of vanilla Greek yogurt. We stood there awkwardly, two women united by betrayal and dairy products. She told me everything, how he'd used my photos, cropped me out, how he complained about his crazy ex, how he said the smart fridge was his. I invited her in. We ate the yogurt with spoons straight from the container, like war survivors. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was spectacular. Mark tried to win me back, then tried to threaten me, then tried to ask if he could at least keep the fridge. I said no. I changed the passwords, renamed it in the app to Cheater Tracker 3000. He blocked me. The fridge, however, stayed loyal. One night, I got a notification that nearly killed me. New user requested access, Mark. Declined. Immediately after, new grocery suggestion, frozen pizza, energy drinks, instant ramen. The fridge had adapted to his bachelor life patterns from past data. Even in exile, it was roasting him. I laughed so hard, I cried. Sarah and I stayed friends. We now joke that if things hadn't worked out, we could have co-parented the fridge. Eventually, I downgraded to a normal one. Peaceful, silent, non-judgmental. But sometimes, late at night, I miss the chaos. Because nothing, not therapy, not wine, not revenge fantasies, was as satisfying as realizing my husband's affair was uncovered by a fridge that cared deeply about yogurt logistics. And somewhere out there, Sarah is probably still wondering why I stopped buying her favorite one. Story 2. My husband thought we were flying to Hawaii. He was wrong. He packed for a vacation. I packed 3 years of patience, and the TSA agent was the first person to tell him our marriage was over. I've been planning this divorce for 3 years, which sounds dramatic until you realize that for the first year, I didn't even know I was planning it. I just started a notes app titled Hawaii Ideas, which slowly evolved into Hawaii Ideas/Evidence, and then finally into Do Not Chicken Out. My husband, Mark, thought the notes were about luau's and snorkeling. They were actually about bank statements, burner emails, and the exact date our joint savings account started hemorrhaging money into something called M Holdings LLC, which was impressive considering Mark could barely hold on to his car keys. Still, I smiled and nodded and practiced my surprised face in the mirror like I was training for the Oscars. By year 2, I had the patience of a Buddhist monk and the emotional range of a customer service chatbot. Mark announced he'd booked us first-class tickets to Hawaii for our anniversary, which was adorable because he booked them using my credit card. I cried happy tears. Real ones. Trauma does that. I let him believe this trip was a reset, a rekindling, a remember us before you lied about being laid off vacation. Meanwhile, my lawyer called it Phase 3, which made me feel like I was in a Marvel movie where the final villain was a man who once forgot my birthday but never forgot his fantasy football draft. The morning of the flight, Mark was unbearable in the way only a man convinced he's winning can be. He kept saying things like, "New chapter, babe," while wearing flip-flops through airport security like TSA wouldn't notice. I watched him flirt with the self-check-in kiosk and felt weirdly nostalgic. 3 years of planning had led to this terminal, this line, this moment, where the TSA agent scanned his passport, paused, frowned slightly, and said, "Sir, could you step aside for a moment?" Mark laughed and said, "What, am I too handsome to fly?" The agent did not laugh. I did not follow him when they led him away. I wish I could say I felt instant triumph, like confetti cannons went off in my soul. But mostly I felt annoyed because Mark had my necktillo. The TSA agent returned alone and asked me to wait. That's when the other agent appeared, holding a manila envelope thick enough to kill a small animal. He asked if I was Mrs. Thompson. I said yes because technically I still was, and because I wanted to see how far this would go. He nodded like someone who had practiced this speech, then said, "Ma'am, your husband will not be boarding this flight. There are documents he needs to be served." Served, like brunch, like karma with a side of fruit. Mark reappeared 10 minutes later, pale, sweating, and suddenly very aware of consequences. He tried to joke again. "Just Hawaii's canceled, huh?" The agent handed him the envelope and said, "Sir, you've been notified." Mark looked at me like I was the last lifeboat on the Titanic. Inside the envelope were divorce papers, a forensic accounting summary, and a polite but devastating letter from my lawyer explaining that M Holdings LLC was, in fact, his girlfriend's Etsy candle business. Also attached, a notice about an active investigation. Mark's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish, realizing the bowl is decorative. The funny part, the TSA agent congratulated me. He whispered, "Best anniversary surprise I've seen all week." Mark tried to grab my arm, missed, and grabbed the strap of my carry-on instead. I told him calmly that the trip was still happening, just not for him. As I walked toward the gate, I heard him yelling my name, then arguing about jurisdiction, then asking if he could at least keep the flip-flops. I didn't turn around. I boarded the plane alone, sat in first class, and ordered champagne. But halfway through takeoff, my phone buzzed with a message that made my stomach drop. The message was from an unknown number, which is never good unless you're a celebrity or a drug dealer. It said, "He doesn't know everything yet." Attached was a photo of Mark standing in the terminal talking to a woman I recognized immediately. The candles, the LLC, the audacity. What I didn't recognize was the look on her face. Smug, confident, victorious. That's when I realized my 3-year plan had one flaw. I'd assumed Mark was the smartest person betraying me. Turns out he was just the loudest. Somewhere over the Pacific, sipping champagne at 30,000 feet, I opened my notes app again and titled a new page, Phase 4. Hawaii was beautiful, in the way places are when you arrive freshly single and slightly unhinged. I spent the first night crying, the second night laughing, and the third night on the phone with my lawyer, who sounded both impressed and alarmed. The investigation widened, accounts froze, stories unraveled. Mark tried calling, I blocked him. His girlfriend tried emailing, I forwarded it. By the time I flew home, the divorce was no longer a negotiation, it was a public service announcement. People keep asking if I regret the timing, the spectacle, the airport scene. Honestly, no. Because every anniversary after this will be compared to the year my husband thought we were flying to Hawaii, and instead he got served at Gate 23B. Story 3. Everyone thinks I'm the crazy wife. They don't know I control everything. They call him a saint. They call me unstable. What they don't know is I've been paying his mistress to stay away while I quietly take everything. Everyone in our town calls my husband a saint, the way people call a very aggressive dog a sweetheart, while standing at a safe distance. They tilt their heads, lower their voices, and tell me how lucky I am that he puts up with me. The rumors say I'm unstable, dramatic, possibly medicated, and definitely one bad day away from screaming in a grocery store. My husband, Mark, smiles modestly during these conversations, squeezes my shoulder like he's grounding a balloon, and says she's just passionate. I smile too because smiling costs nothing and screaming costs lawyers. What no one sees is how carefully I've curated this image, like a haunted house with excellent curb appeal and termites chewing through the beams. The truth is, I wasn't always crazy. I became crazy the same way people become wine experts, slowly, expensively, and because someone betrayed me. 5 years ago, I found a second phone in Mark's gym bag, buzzing like an angry wasp during dinner. On it was a woman named Lila, who used too many emojis and not enough shame. When I confronted him, he cried, I laughed, then I cried harder, which confused him deeply. He swore it was over, that he chose me, that he stayed because he loved me despite my episodes. That word stuck. Episodes. Like I was a faulty TV flickering between channels of rage and forgiveness. Lila didn't disappear. She hovered. She likes my posts accidentally on purpose. She parked across the street sometimes. And then, one night, after Mark fell asleep mid-apology, I did the most unhinged thing of my life. I messaged her. Not to threaten, not to beg. I asked how much it would cost for her to vanish. She thought I was joking. I sent proof of funds. She stopped replying for 3 days. On the 4th, she said yes. That was the moment I realized everyone had misunderstood the situation. Mark wasn't staying with a crazy wife. He was living inside my very calm, very patient long game. Paying your husband's mistress to stay away is cheaper than divorce and significantly more satisfying. We met once in a nail salon that smelled like acetone and despair. Lila expected a breakdown. I brought spreadsheets. I explained that the house was still half in Mark's name, that infidelity laws were a joke, and that patience was my kink. She laughed, then stopped laughing when I slid the contract across the table. Monthly payments, strict no contact, a bonus clause if she moved out of state. She asked what would happen if she didn't agree. I told her nothing dramatic, which scared her more than threats ever could. We shook hands with nails half painted, like women ending a very niche business deal. Meanwhile, Mark leaned harder into his martyr role. He told friends I was spiraling, that I accused him of imaginary affairs, that I monitored his location for my anxiety. He didn't know I encouraged this narrative. I cried at parties on cue. I apologized for existing. I let him feel noble. Saints don't check bank statements too closely, apparently, because he never noticed the recurring transfers labeled yoga. Leela moved 3 states away. Mark aged 10 years from the stress of being so good to someone so awful. The irony tasted delicious, like revenge, served cold and gluten-free. Then came the first twist. Mark announced he wanted to refinance the house to help us reset. Translation, he wanted more control. I agreed instantly, which unsettled him. During the signing, I watched his name slide off the deed like a loose tooth, exactly as my lawyer promised. That night, he tried to reconnect romantically, fueled by relief and cheap wine. I laughed so hard I had to pretend it was a panic attack. He slept on the couch, saintly and confused. I texted Leela a bonus. She replied with a single halo emoji. That should have been the end. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, Leela called me. Not texted, called. That's how you know something's wrong. She told me Mark had reached out, said he missed her, said I was losing it and he needed comfort. I thanked her for the information and asked her to forward the messages. She did, bless her entrepreneurial heart. Then I asked her to do one last thing for double the rate. She hesitated. I tripled it. Some people call this manipulation. I call it outsourcing. I invited Mark to dinner, wore the dress he liked, played the role of the unstable wife trying too hard. Mid-meal, I handed him my phone. On it were screenshots, timestamps, and a pre-filled email to his boss, his mother, and his church group. I told him he could leave with his dignity intact or stay and sign the post-nuptial agreement in my bag. He laughed until he saw I wasn't laughing. Saints crumble fast when the choir stops singing. He signed. He moved out by morning. The town mourned him. They still pity me. Sometimes Leela and I get coffee. The house is quiet now, peaceful, and finally, entirely mine. Story 4. A TikTok DNA test destroyed my entire family. It was supposed to be a joke, a trend. Now I know my father has another family, and my mother has been funding their life for 10 years. I took a DNA test because TikTok told me to. Literally. It was 2 a.m., I was doom scrolling, and some girl found out she was 12% Viking and suddenly had a personality. I thought it would be funny content. POV, you thought you were boring and white. I mailed my spit, forgot about it, and went back to believing my dad was the human equivalent of a beige wall. He's a high school math teacher, never missed a game, never raised his voice, files taxes early for fun. My parents had been married for 34 years, zero drama. I used to joke that if my dad had a secret, it would be a Costco membership we didn't know about. 3 weeks later, the results dropped. Ethnicity was boring. Then I collect DNA matches. A woman popped up listed as close family, estimated half-sibling. Same last name as my dad, same chin, same weirdly intense eyes. I laughed out loud like an idiot, assuming the app was glitching. Then I clicked her profile. Age, 27. Location, 2 towns over. Bio line, mom of 2. Coffee is life. I refreshed the page like it would apologize. It did not. I messaged her a very calm, very normal sentence. Hey, this is probably a mistake, lol. She replied in 5 seconds. I don't think it is. Is your dad Mark? My stomach dropped so hard I thought I'd invented a new organ. We agreed to talk. On the phone. Like psychos. She sounded just as shaken. She told me her dad's name was Mark. Same job, same birthday, same voice when he gets tired. She'd grown up thinking he traveled a lot for district trainings. I told her my dad coached Little League and cried at dog movies. Silence. Then she said, "There's more. I think our moms know." That's when the cliff edge appeared, and I realized I was already sprinting toward it. I confronted my mom first, because I thought she'd laugh and say the app was wrong. She didn't. She sat down, like gravity suddenly worked harder on her. She asked me how much I knew. I told her about the half-sister. She nodded. Just nodded. Then she said, "I was hoping you'd never find out like this." That sentence alone deserves jail time. Turns out my dad has had a second family for almost 30 years. Not an affair, a parallel life. Different house, different kids, same dad jokes. My mom found out when I was 5. He begged, cried, promised stability, promised he'd never leave either family, and my mom, for reasons I still can't fully process, agreed. Here's the fun twist TikTok didn't prepare me for. My mom has been secretly paying the mortgage on the other house for 10 years. Not child support, not emergencies, the actual mortgage. She showed me bank statements like she was presenting a PowerPoint titled, "How I Lost My Mind Gradually." Her logic? If they were stable, your father wouldn't leave us. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I laughed harder because this was so unhinged it felt fake. Meanwhile, my dad thought the other family's mom was just really good with money. Apparently, my mother has been quietly sponsoring his double life like it was a Patreon tier. I called my dad. He denied nothing. He sounded relieved, actually, like someone finally took a heavy backpack off him by lighting it on fire. He said he loved us both. He said he'd never meant to hurt anyone. He said he thought he was managing it. I told him he wasn't managing anything. He was running a franchise. Then my half-sister texted me, "My mom says your mom is a saint." I almost threw my phone into traffic. That's when my mom dropped the final bomb. The other family thinks I know nothing. Until now. Everything exploded within 48 hours. The other mom called mine, screaming, crying, apologizing, then demanding explanations like this was customer service. My dad tried to mediate and somehow made it worse by suggesting family dinner. I met my half-siblings in a Starbucks parking lot like a drug deal. We compared childhood photos and realized he took us to the same zoo on alternating weekends. Same giraffe, same dumb hat. One of them said, "At least he's consistent," and we all lost it laughing like grief hadn't just moved in rent-free. The mortgage thing leaked. That was the nuclear option. The other mom felt betrayed. My dad felt emasculated. My mom felt free. She closed the account, filed for separation, slept for 12 straight hours for the first time in years. My dad now lives alone in an apartment with folding chairs and no one to pay his bills. The man who ran 2 households can't find his toaster. Karma works fast when it's tired of your nonsense. Now I have a half-sister I text memes with daily, a mom who's rediscovering who she is, and a dad who calls me too often and asks if I'm mad or just disappointed mad. I still haven't posted the TikTok. I don't think the algorithm is ready for "I wanted content and accidentally exposed a 3-decade emotional Ponzi scheme." But yeah, take the test. It's fun. Just be ready in case your family tree turns out to be a maze with a minotaur and unpaid emotional debts.